What if your biggest obstacle in life isn't failure, but remaining comfortable? Welcome to It's the Good Life. My name is Josh. This is Anthony and David. And today, this is going to be our second episode of a two-part series where we previously talked about contentment, which is the idea of you are enough, but that doesn't mean that you're not open to growing. But today, we're going to be talking about the other side of the spectrum, which is complacency, which is I am too comfortable and I don't need to grow. When I think about complacency, I often think that it's a negative thing, just because you're complacent, you're comfortable, but I also don't know if people really fully understand what complacency is, and also what brings about complacency. You know what I mean? The first thing I thought about when I was thinking about complacency is like a super ginormous soft beanbag that you find at IKEA.
Sounds
You
familiar.
seem to be laughing.
Sounds a bit too familiar.
It almost sounds like one of the guys on these couches bought one of these.
Wonder
But
who that was.
I used to have a really large beanbag when I was a kid. And I think the greatest thing about this beanbag was I could probably sit in this beanbag for like 8 hours and play video games and not move and not go to the bathroom and not eat anything and be perfectly satisfied for the entire time. Thinking back on that, and certainly within this context of talking about complacency, it makes me wonder, like, what causes people to be complacent? What causes us to be complacent in life?
Causes us to be complacent in life. I think it's a working idea. I'm not gonna say I have the answer, but I think it's somewhat this idea that part of me feels like there's this acceptance that you can't do anything about your situation, and therefore you have to accept it.
That's one. I think that's one.
That's
big,
one.
Yeah,
right?
that's one.
That's
reason.
one idea.
Yeah. Well, okay. Wait. So you said it's like you can't do anything about your situation, right?
Yes.
And you essentially, complacency is the response. It's like I can't do anything, so therefore I'm not going to do anything about it. Is that what you mean?
I think I'd argue that yes, I think to an extent I would say that you think you can't do anything about your situation.
Keyword think.
I'm not trying to put my cards on the table. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not trying to put my cards on the table, but I think it's the idea that, like, someone who is, let's just say this, someone who is complacent would maybe say, it's just how it is. I can't do anything about it. It is what it is. I think that's something someone complacent would say.
I have a challenging question for you.
Yeah.
Right off the bat,
I
here
love
we
challenge.
go. What if we spent a whole 45 minutes talking about contentment?
Yeah.
Can that phrase of "there's nothing I can do about the situation" also be applied to being content? How do you distinguish between someone saying that for the pursuit of being content versus the pursuit of being complacent?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that I'm trying to formulate the answer for it. So you're saying that the same person that's content can say the same thing?
Yeah. So maybe I'll frame it a little bit more, right? So it's like, let's say going back to me taking my boards, right? Let's say I didn't pass, right? I could say there's nothing I can do about that now, right? Could be me saying I'm content with the outcome, right? There's nothing I can do about it. I have to be content with it, right? But that same phrase of "there's nothing I can do about it" can also be applied to I am looking for a job and I haven't done any job applications, but there's no jobs out there, so there's nothing I can do about that. You know what I mean? It's the same phrase applied to two different contexts.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying here. I think the way you approach it from someone who is complacent compared to someone who is just content is very different, because I think the person that is content takes in the situation of I failed my board exam, but what can I do next? And there's that person that is almost the other side, which is complacency, and they say I took my board exam and I failed, and this just wasn't meant for me. Like, and this just, it is what it is.
oh, so maybe I should drop nursing altogether.
Right.
It's like sort of the complacency of like,
Yeah,
I can't do this at all.
And I think that throws in that kind of, side hook of, well, then is a distinguishing factor kind of like, is it your ability to want to change, or is there a certain positive or negative outlook on the situation? But I think in general, the way I see it, is kind of in some ways parsed like that.
That's interesting.
I don't know.
No.
What do you guys think? What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Let me hear what's on this side of the table.
I'm thinking.
We're like,
Oh, how the turns have tabled.
So like,
on the turntable.
I mean, where, if anything, does the word like comfort come into this conversation, right? Because
Okay.
I think comfort might be
Comfort.
something that complacency utilizes a lot of, or maybe entirely, exists on. I who knows? But I think that's a discussion that I'm thinking of. Like, is comfortability fitting into the equation where, like, when you look at complacency, it's a big part of that, and now we have to address the questions of, okay, how comfortable are you, like, with the fact of needing to change, or what does growth look like to you? Does that mean that you shouldn't be comfortable?
Well, I think the question I would pose to you is being comfortable good or bad?
Ooh, that's a very black and white question.
It is.
Or is it?
You think
Is
comfort's
it one
bad?
or the other?
Huh?
You think comfort's bad? Or it is good?
I think. Oh, I was basically agreeing to you, Josh.
It is.
It is black and white question.
Oh,
yes.
that's what you mean.
Yeah.
Well, David, from a lot of your responses in the past and just understanding the past 23 episodes of, no, I'm just kidding. The past, episodes of what you've been talking about, I think you hold discomfort at a very high level.
Absolutely. I hold everything at a high level.
Well, so to my understanding, there's obviously value in discomfort that you see.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually really curious specifically, what is your stance and your perspective towards comfort then?
I think the clearest way I can put it is complacency feeds on comfort. And so if you're a very comfortable person, I would say you're probably most certainly complacent.
Oh, like they're related.
Yeah, they're parallels for sure.
Yeah.
Like if complacency and comfortability are working in the same direction, they're basically adjacent to each other at the same goal. Because almost like an equation, like that plus that would equal, and then the repercussion or consequence of you being comfortable and then complacency being more definitively like not taking the action to change or grow, when we look in contrast to the definition of contentment, which is you are enough, but you are willing to grow.
It feels like you're describing like sitting on an uncomfortable chair, right? Like if you're sitting on a chair that's like, I don't know if you've ever shared a chair with somebody.
Yeah, like one
It's
single
like,
chair.
one tush on one tush,
Yes.
And it's like, I think the natural reaction to being uncomfortable is that you want to move, right?
Right.
But if you're sitting in a really nice chair, the last thing that you want to do is start moving, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what you're saying, right? It's like when you are sitting in a really comfortable position in life, like you're less inclined to feel motivated to change anything about it.
Right.
Versus like when you are in an uncomfortable position, right? Like if your finances are hard, if your location is difficult, if your relationships are strained, like you're inclined to move because the discomfort motivates you. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I have to, I guess my challenge to that then would be, are people who are maybe more comfortable in life, whether that's like financially, like either like their living space, does that mean that they can't also grow? You know what I mean? Like if someone is sitting in a comfortable chair, if you would, in a comfortable season of life, in a comfortable, like if I had all the finances in the world to do anything I wanted,
right,
would that necessarily mean that I'm not able to continue to develop?
Right, and grow.
Like are they mutually exclusive?
Yeah, that's once again another black and white question.
Yeah. Like boom.
Great thing to think about.
I don't know, Anthony, do you have
what's brewing over there?
I was asking.
No,
I think it's throwing
open
out.
To you. It's open to you too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, can you be comfortable and be challenge yourself to grow?
I think you have to define comfort in that case.
Okay, so what's comfort then?
Well, if we choose to define it as a way, in a situation where all your needs are met, okay, that's pretty basic.
Yeah, that's a pretty basic.
I have a roof over
understanding
my
of
head, I
comfort.
have food, what else do I need? But if you're defining comfort as I am where I want to be in life, wow. Now we have a bigger question. So I think it really depends on your standard.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing to discuss because your standard in life is very much, I think, can define what you go after, what you're pursuing. Because if your standard is, I'm meeting my needs of eating, of basic necessities, then the bar is a lot lower, right? But if it's, you want to make it one day, you want to retire your parents, you want to, be a pilot or whatever, like that's going to take a lot of a bigger effort on your part. So I think there's this quote that says like, the bigger your dreams are, the bigger your actions have to be. And, for me as someone with big dreams, I think a lot of that, the way I take that in is I have to have a lot of action to match it up. And I think everyone has a different view of that in life. I think that's why it can be controversial, like you said, because some people may not want to retire their parents. Like that's just not a goal for them. And other people really have that burning desire, like I really want to provide. And so I think we're all created so differently in that way. But I think unless we define what comfort is, it's hard to answer that question.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that I wanted to point out something that you said was this idea of comfort as kind of like contentment too, as like something that everybody standardizes for themselves, right? And so it's like I was talking with my girlfriend about her mission trip to Africa, and the definition of what comfort means to those kids is far different than what I can define as comfort. In my mind, as I'm sure you know in your own experience in mission trips, right? It's like having a roof over my head, having stable finances, having a bed to sleep in, having food. It's like for them, it's like 50% of that, not having that, they're still considered comfortable living, or maybe even more than that, right?
Yeah.
And so I wonder then too, right? Kind of like you said, right? If this pursuit of pushing against complacency is less so than like trying to avoid being comfortable, but setting your standard for what comfortable actually looks like, right? And so, for you, right, like you say, I'm going to be comfortable, or I want to pursue a comfortable life that is one that I can support my parents in their retirement, that I can live autonomously through a job I enjoy. Like you're setting a standard for what comfort is, so then everything that's not that is considered uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? Which then, as we've talked about, is a motivating force for you to pursue that comfort in some sense. Right. This is getting really in-depth.
Well,
good.
That brings to mind something that's really one thing that stuck out to me about what you said was this idea of standards. And I think it's really interesting the way the Bible discusses standards, because I think about the parable of the talents. And I don't know if you know where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
but
I do. Yes.
It's interesting because I think in life, as we were talking about in the last episode, there is this comparison happening between one person to the next. In our own lives too, we compare ourselves to other people. But in the idea of the parable of the talents, if you guys don't know, it's this story where people are given different amounts of talent. And according to the talents that they were given, they're also expected almost a different amount of talents back. And so, obviously one like goes and buries it, the other one, brings back double fold, and like, the person with more brings back more. And it's this idea that I think when we're all placed on this earth, like not all of us were born with the silver spoon in our mouth. And I think to those people, God has that mercy and that grace to see that, hey, like you didn't start at this point where, this person was a trust fund baby. Like they had it all already to begin with. I would think that God would expect a lot more out of that person, right? And I think that's the way I visualize, going back to something we talked about earlier too, is the idea of whether or not you want to do something about your situation and what that says about contentment and complacency. Because for me personally, I believe that with what God has given me, with the talents and the gifts, the few talents and the gifts that He's given me,
Bro, that's an understatement. Get out of here.
I think that using that to the full ability, for me, it like that's kind of what I base my standard on for myself. And so how can we then compare myself to other people when God gave them totally different talents?
Yeah.
And I think that's almost for me like the secret to, I think I posted and talked about this earlier this week, but this idea, the secret of why we compare is that we aren't confident in the lane that we're in. We aren't confident that, people say like stay in your own lane, but the path that we're traveling, we're not confident that that's the right path for us. Because if we were, I think we are in alignment with our values, we're in alignment with our goals, then even when other people pass us by, maybe they're driving a little bit faster, maybe they're a little bit slower, maybe they have a better car than us, but I don't care, I'm headed to the right direction. Maybe they got off the freeway, but hey, I know my exit is 203, it's not 202. So I know exactly where I'm headed, and I think that's the clarity of that is what breeds your ability to be content in the situation. Sorry, that was also a mouthful on top of the depth that you added to that conversation earlier. So,
now we're basically underground at this point.
So now we're like way too deep, and we
In the
need to swim
bunkers.
back up to the surface so that this
Yeah.
is tangible.
So
for-
maybe we can resurface a little bit, right? So we talked about one of the sources of complacency is the pursuit of comfort. I think one of the other sources of complacency is this desire to feel safe, which is different from comfort. Because comfort is like I want to feel good about where I am, right? But feeling safe is different, right?
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, and this kind of goes into that sort of post-college stereotype, right? Which we've talked about in previous episodes. It's like you finish college, and then the first thing a lot of kids our age do is they just go home and like live at home, maybe pursue a job, maybe don't pursue a job, maybe try. I think the phrase that's commonly said that I've heard is like they're just trying to figure it out, right? Is like what parents of my friends have said. Like they're just trying to figure it out. They're in a season of life. They're trying to figure it out, right? Yeah. But what are your thoughts on that? Like the safety as a source of complacency.
Well, I mean, I think I'm a living testament to just how real that statement can be, because
Sure.
I definitely am a person who goes against the tide on that, for sure. Like I
would agree on that.
right? I mean,
I'm surprised
anecdotally,
about that.
look at really,
Sorry, Kyle.
no, I know, is like as my like I would consider just the amount of closeness you guys have been able to just examine my life from a third perspective. I think you guys understand and know me very well to the point where like I choose difficulty for a reason. And when I look at this concept or idea of contentment, I really think about what value that brings ultimately. And I think a lot of what contentment brings when I choose the hard, when I choose the difficult, when I choose a path that's basically the road less traveled. Thank you, Mr. Frost. But I
love that, bro. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Super good. I enjoy not just the thrill that you get or the exhilarating feeling of like being able to actually live in comparison to existing, but what I know that I'm actually attaining in contrast to just the comfortability that is so easily to come by, or the convenience of accessibility that almost every common human being can have.
Yeah.
But I think especially, for the audience to ponder on, whether you have a relationship with Christ or not, I think importantly too, especially if you do have a relationship with God, that there is a really important, I would say almost like a standard to living your life, not to be like a model Christian, but to understand what it means to be a true, honest Christian, one who goes through the adversity and understands that there's value and love and still a partnership going on between you and Christ, even through the most difficult times. Right. And it's very different for myself because, I mean, once again, I'm a person who chooses difficulty. I literally put into the analogy all the time. Anthony knows this, but it's like if I started the game of life, like just we're starting, I put it on the most hardest difficulty. And the ultimate reason
that's
for
crazy,
that
bro.
is like you
Crank.
can't right, like turn it
Hard
all
mode.
the way
Hard
up.
mode. Straight up driving with no assist at all.
But
Playing Mario Kart full
Yeah.
manual.
Yeah, oh my god. Straight up gears and
dude,
everything.
that would be something.
That
for
would be
sure.
insane.
Like extra buttons for like a manual.
Oh,
like,
God.
transmission compared to just automatic. Like,
Oh, heck no. You drive stick, basically,
yeah,
in life.
yeah.
But it's interesting how you say that, like, the definition of a Christian is someone who will pursue trial. In some senses, right?
Right.
I'm not saying that verbatim exactly how you say it.
Right.
But it's like James 1:2-3, where it says, like, you will experience trials of many kinds. He doesn't say you might, you could. No, you will. Like,
Right.
you're going to. And, like, you should respond with perseverance and
Yes.
faithfulness as a response to what I've done for you, right? And interestingly too, it's like it's very much the Christian calling, especially in the early church, that Christ wasn't like, go to the safe places, go talk to the rich people. He's like, go to the people that you're not comfortable with and
Yeah.
don't feel safe around and preach, even though Christians are being persecuted. Like,
Yeah.
it was a not safe life.
Absolutely.
The Christian calling was.
Absolutely.
Which kind of begs the question, right? Of like, if the calling of being a Christian is not necessarily one that is safe, how do we be obedient to God and look for opportunities that maybe you could argue are not safe?
Faith integration.
Okay.
Like very practical. And what faith integration looks like, I mean, from a perspective, perhaps, could be you heading into a specific career field of serving missions out. And I mean, perhaps you're coming from a nursing background, right? And you're going to serve and you're applying first aid or just care to some wounded villagers from a specific, place and
Wakanda.
location. And it's like your heart. I might have missed whatever was going on there.
No, this is a comedy.
Oh, got it. But ultimately, it's like, where's your heart at in that specific instance, and how is your relationship with God prioritized over this space that you're serving and helping these people that
Yeah.
need aid, that need, support and care and health,
Yeah.
right? And I think faith integration is just one perspective of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And I say that confidently because it's one of the things, at least that I've taken from graduating from college, as like a really big like life lesson to almost apply in every aspect of whatever you're going into. Your field of work, your hobbies and interests, your friendships, relationships, your family dynamics, starting a family and marriage and it's just like
what's your priority is what you're saying.
Right.
It's like, is your priority your safety, or is your priority like the development of your spirit in some ways,
Right,
Like,
right.
like what's the long-term goal?
right.
I don't know if that's exactly what you're
I think,
getting at.
and on top of that would just be like also asking the question like how well do you prioritize? Like, I think there's once again, like I keep bringing this word of like standards, because not only do I hold myself to a high standard, but I think I have this set expectation of like, as I go about life, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And then if I'm not reaching it, how can I bring the value to that space in order that that thing can be valuable to such a high standard? Because I care that deeply that someone like a really close friend of mine will succeed. Like I want them to succeed. And or I want to support a specific thing going on in whether it's a person's life or a program or an organization.
Yeah.
Like the examples are real vast.
Well, it's like the accountability with people who like with the accountability associated with complacency, right? Like if someone is becoming complacent. And also I want to contextualize that complacency is not just about jobs.
Right.
Like that can be complacency about your moral standards, right? Like that can be complacency with sin.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, I'm comfortable in sin. Right? That's complacency, right? So it's like even in the midst of holding accountability in that space, right? It's like maybe this might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but maybe one of the pushbacks with complacency is surrounding yourself with people who will hold you accountable, right? So it's like you would have a close friend who would say, hey David, I noticed that you're maybe like you're slacking in this area of your life. Like, what's happening?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But you also have to be willing to receive that. To
Right.
be like, oh boy,
Yeah.
I am slacking in that. You know? Versus you can also be like, I don't care about what you have to say at all.
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going the route that I'm going regardless of what people say.
Right.
Sort of like a stubbornness in a way.
I hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like in terms of the conversation about doing hard things, I think if David were on like one spectrum of like always go hard,
He'd probably be on the always go hard.
well, no, I'd actually argue that there's a balance to how hard you should try at things. And to illustrate that, I think it's this idea of like there's seasons in life that sometimes you're a little bit more equipped to push a little bit harder than others. Because, for example, you know, in the season that I was going through this breakup, it was very hard. I felt like I was thrown in a blender, and like you're gonna tell me to do all this stuff that, you know, climb Mount Gorgonio and do all this. Like I wasn't in a place to do that. I wasn't even in a place. I wasn't in a place to start a podcast. Like what? No, you know, it wasn't the time and the place, right?
Yeah.
But you know, in the moment, in the season afterwards, as God I think continued to reveal that the year after, that's when like basically everything happened. Like the podcast started, the bodybuilding competition landed, we got the job, like everything happened. And had I had my eyes set on that year, I think it was maybe 2023 or 2022, where you know, I was just hitting my breakup. Like had I known, I would have no idea that I would be where I am today.
Oh yeah.
And if you were to tell me, you know, you have to do all those things where you're at right now, like in your breakup, I would have said no. Like, there's no way, God. I don't think that's the right path for me. But, you know, hindsight, of course, we look back and we say, oh yeah, of course. Like, you know, that being said, I think sometimes it feels like there's moments where in life you can push a little bit harder, and there's other moments where it's okay to dial it back, and I think giving people permission to do that is also valid. But I think the idea with complacency is it's okay to have like grief. It's a process, as you know, like you learned that in school too. But like you gotta know when it's time. Like I talked about in the last episode, when you hit rock bottom, you gotta know when it's time to call it quits and say like, hey, I'm done with being stuck in this point. Like it's time to move now. And so that transition needs to happen at some point too. And so I think there is a balance to, I think, working really hard and doing, like going crazy at what you're doing, and then the other flip side of like, hey, like let's dial it back, let's reset, let's get a little more clear about what we want to do, and then let's go back into a little stronger next season. Right. It's all about that push and pull, and like bodybuilding has taught me that. I see that in so many facets of life. Even in nursing, when you're burnt out, do you keep studying? No, right? Like
Yes.
there's a day that
No.
there's times where you have to push through, right?
Yeah.
But then there's also times when you're like, this is just way out of my capacity. Maybe you can speak
Yeah.
into that, Josh, but
Right.
you know, it's just like way too much.
Yeah. Well, I guess that kind of, maybe to like expand a little bit more on that, and I think this is kind of like a really important question to ask, particularly for those who are maybe trying to pursue doing hard things, but then finding themselves experiencing burnout, like experiencing the opposite problem, where you're like you are going hard way too much for way too long, but then knowing that the pullback is not complacency, right? Like, and that's something that I think that you've modeled to me very well, right? Is like the difference between complacency and self-care, because they can look the same, they can look very similar, but they're very much different, right? So it's like it's the intentionality, right? So it's like, you know, I think it was maybe like a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
I texted Anthony and said, hey, like, what are you up to today? You want to hang out? I was like, just like a little kindergartner. I'm like, hey, can your mom see if we can hang out or not? And he said, you know, actually today is like my Sabbath day. Like he intentionally said, like, I'm not gonna be doing anything crazy today. Like this is dedicated to not doing much. And then I and then I said, well, I'm gonna be going to a cafe. Like, do you want to go? He's like, well, that's within Sabbath, so we can totally go.
Oh wow.
But the point I want to get to in that is that there was an intentionality to slow down, right? Versus I think when someone is complacent, when I've been complacent in my life, there's no limit on the slowdown. It's like I'm just slowing down to slow down, and there's no end to how long I'm slowing down, and that's it.
Yeah.
Versus like his slowdown was like, today I'm gonna slow down and I'm gonna do less and I'm not gonna plan stuff with intention, with full intention, that the next day I can go back and more rested, fully prepared to do the best I can. Right. So what was like what was your experience of developing the difference between the two, of choosing self-care and defining it as self-care versus it being complacency, and how when you are experiencing self-care do you push back against this, like the temptation of thinking that you're being complacent, especially being someone who's as driven as you are?
Yeah.
You know what I'm asking?
Yes. Yeah. I think it's this illustration of trying to kind of swim like upstream, because I think I'm gonna touch on a few things we talked about already, but this desire to feel safe, I think, is a commonality that we all share. And we all have this feeling of, we're, like you said, just figuring it out. I think we're always figuring it out. Like, we never have it. Like, when's the last time you heard someone, oh, I figured it out? You know, like that, you don't hear that. It's just, it's still like, I'm in the process of this. Even like married people, like they're still figuring it out.
Right.
And I think there's a certain humility to that. But I think it's also safe to say that comfort is often the default. So we often will, if we were to be on this stream, right? Like if we were just to do nothing, we would slowly kind of go down that river of comfort. And that's what it looks like. But for me, like working hard is really swimming upstream and trying to go the other direction. And of course that's going to take work. Like of course that's going to be tiring. And there's going to be points where you're going to be just exhausted and you're going to need a pause. But there's a difference between stopping where you're at and just letting the river continue to pull you down towards comfort, and there's a difference between treading water and kind of staying where you're at. So I think in my head, like self-care and being able to take care of yourself is like treading water, is like allowing you to kind of stay in the same place where you're at. You're not necessarily progressing, but you're also not regressing. You're kind of maintaining the things that you're doing until you're in a stable position to continue to push forward for another 20 meters, 30 meters, like, you know, for that final push of the race. And so, yeah, like you see, I don't know if you've ever like gone into the space of like ultra marathons or like races that are like over the span of a few days. Maybe you have, David, but David Goggins is someone that does that. And there's moments where you need to sleep. Like there's moments where you need to, but then that's calculated. You know, you need to
Like it's intentional.
know. Yeah, it's intentional, and obviously it's a race. Like the first person that gets to the finish line wins, but there's still the acknowledgement that, hey, you still have another 200 miles ahead. Like you need to get some sleep in before tomorrow. And then maybe we'll wake up early and hit it the next day. So I think it's just that idea of, you know, being able to swim upstream, but also realizing that sometimes it's okay to tread water in life. Sometimes it's okay to stay in that position for a little bit until you feel like you've gotten things kind of under control, and then you can kind of move forward with that.
Yeah. I think all three of us are pretty driven people, generally speaking. And I think like that's the reason I asked that question, is to really focus on what complacency is, both for people who are struggling with it as like a lifestyle, but also for people who are driven and are trying to avoid complacency. Like I think that's the other demographic of people we're speaking about. And I just love that you pointed out how there is intention. Like intention is the difference between complacency and self-care.
Yeah.
And just kind of as we're wrapping up here, I do want to think about more like the practicality of pursuing self-care, particularly within the context of complacency, but also just about like in what parts of our lives can complacency exist. And I think I highlighted this very briefly at the beginning, but this can be about really anything, right? Like it can be about practically jobs, like applying to jobs or pursuing finances, but it can also be relational, right? Like, am I being complacent in my relationship? Am I being complacent in my friendships, right? Like, am I not giving attention to my friends that need that sort of attention?
Right.
Am I being complacent in my moral standing with God? Like, am I sinning and being okay with it? You know what I mean? And so just kind of taking a step back and just thinking about like the practicality of the struggle of intentionally pushing against complacency in our lives.
Right.
I would invite us just to kind of think about what ways you personally have navigated pushing against complacency in your life.
There are like two thoughts that come through my head, and the first one I'll start off is journaling your thoughts.
That's a word.
I think that definitely helps one person navigate difficult times, and almost like a self-reflection, and that kind of filters and feeds into also your self-care, because you're prioritizing what's going on with you and getting that on a page where you can see it, and then I would hope process it slowly.
Right.
And the second one would be not being afraid to ask for help, especially on a social, relational level. So I would imagine this can be difficult, because I'm trying to consider, everyone is like, there are people out here who don't really have a close person that they can vulnerably share, ultimately like some of their most deepest, darkest, in the valley, hit rock bottom type of circumstances. But I would encourage taking that chance with seeing who might be the most person that's trustable and agreeable, but also willing to put you in a challenge or a place that encourages you to recognize where your life is and perhaps want to do better, change, grow. Those are the two things that come across in a practical sense, right?
So journaling, and also accountability.
Right.
And interestingly too, like Anthony got me on this like 4 years ago now. Feels like a long time ago.
Yeah.
But like journaling is an accountability, right? Because it puts your situation on paper, which by doing that, you're solidifying it as something that's real.
Right.
You know what I mean? Versus like it's just in your head, right? Oh, like I thought this thing, I struggle with this thing, just this spiral. But when you put it on paper, it's like, oh, I am struggling. You know what I mean? Or I am thriving, or whatever it might be.
Right.
So I think those are two really great accountability resources. Just want to give affirmation to that.
Yeah, I think you guys actually, just listening to you guys, has been great. It helped me kind of clarify some ideas in my head about working hard, and I think I've formulated now I think my working theory here is that I think it's always good to work hard. I think I kind of take back what I said earlier about even in your breakup season, I think I was working hard, just not necessarily in that specific area of my life. And
Yeah.
I think it's important to make that distinction too, because I think when we talk about hard work and when we talk about this idea of, going after the things you want, after a breakup, you feel like you have nothing. You feel like you have nothing that you want, if you've ever experienced that. But in that season, I chose to work hard in the gym. I chose to work hard with work. I chose to work hard, and, make a little bit more money. Like that was the focus that I chose in that season of my life, not that that's going to be the focus for my entire life, right? Just to clarify that. But in the season that your life, I think choosing one focus or one area of your life to work really hard in, I think is one of the takeaways that I have from this episode, because even if you are really going through a very difficult relationship thing, or maybe financially you're going through a different thing, there's always some area of your life that you are able to work really hard in. And practicing the ability of working hard is such a valuable skill, I think, in today's world.
Yeah.
Because we default, like I said, to that safety, to the comfort of going downstream.
Right.
And when you continue to practice hard work, you never lose practice of it.
Yeah. Well, I will round off the episode by saying thank you to both of you guys. This is a really fun topic to talk about, and I think it's something that a lot of people, I think every person besides Jesus struggles with. One thing I will say that I don't really think I give a lot of attention to as well, that Anthony, you touched on as well, is that we live in a world that is trying to pursue being comfortable. Not only is that our default, but that's also the core message that we're getting in life. You need to be comfortable with your finances. You need to be comfortable within your social life. You need to be like, whatever it might be, right? And I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I've received, not only like on the topic of complacency, but just as a Christian, is just to remain vigilant, right? Like that the enemy is after you and he wants you bad. And the more that you get close to the Lord, the more that the greater the target is on your back.
Right.
And so I think that remaining vigilant means keep your eyes open to parts of your life, whether they're big or small, that are growing complacent. And take every intentionality to not necessarily like pull the weeds, but like pull the weeds, you know? And yeah, I think that's kind of like the biggest takeaway I have, in addition to what a great conversation. Yeah.
Well, what would you guys, maybe just to end off on the final question, what's something that you guys would tell, what maybe one piece of advice would you give to somebody that is kind of wrestling with that season of just being complacent
Like
with where they're
stuck.
at?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe they're stuck, maybe mentally, maybe they're going through a certain mindset issue of, you know, they just don't have the motivation to do the things they want to do, and they're kind of tired of it. They're wanting a way out, but they just don't know how.
This simple idea, it's like a short little analogical thing that I came through. It's just like an idea of like a car. And if you're a broken car and you have many broken parts, but you're not necessarily going anywhere because you're remaining idle, I think about that in complacency, and in contrast to one's life is you can have, for example, a very expensive car, and you could be one there's a lot of value because, you know, for X, Y, whatever reason. But if your car remains idle and you're not working on yourself, you're not choosing to change and fix these things that are hurting, breaking you, tearing you down, then you're just going to stay stuck in that entire same place. And you can give the value all that you want of I'm this specific model, I'm this specific person. But if you're not moving forward and choosing growth, you're going to stay in the same place. And ultimately, you recognize that after so long, you know, if nothing's changed, then nothing's changed. And that's probably just the biggest realization I would encourage people, I would hope not to come to, and therefore try to choose action and growth over idleness and comfort.
Word. Word. Yeah. Idleness is not a word that we've said this entire episode, but I think it's really good in describing like complacency, idleness. What do you, Anthony?
Yeah, I think I would just echo what you said, David, too. And it's been interesting. Some of you guys may not know, but recently I gave my old car back to my parents, and I acquired a new car. And this new car has this cruise feature on it, where you can basically hit this button, and it will just maintain the speed of your car, and like you can pretty much just drive with a little less effort, so to speak. And I think it's interesting because I found myself using that cruise like more now that I have it, and in doing so, as a result, in some ways have just been like not as attentive to driving. And I explain that because I think it's interesting that I feel like a lot of us go through life also in cruise control. I feel like a lot of us also go through life kind of with what's safe, with kind of pressing this button and expecting it to get us to point A to point B, and then just not really focusing on the journey to get there. And all we care about is, okay, are we there yet? Are we there yet? No? Okay. And then when we finally get there, it's like, then that's when everything begins. But I think it's interesting to think about, like, what if you turn cruise control off and you really enjoyed that experience of driving the car? What if you turn cruise control off in your life and really enjoyed the moments, the little things that take intention, the journey of getting to that destination, and, you know, take part in all those little things, and then enjoy the destination too when you get there? Like, wouldn't you find so much more enjoyment in the totality of life? And so that's I think an idea that I've been definitely wrestling with a lot more, is that idea of living life on I guess, manual mode, or like driving,
On stick.
without cruise, without
Yeah.
cruising through, or in other words, going through the motions. And
Word.
I think oftentimes when we do go through the motions, it's complementary to just being complacent and not necessarily being where I want to be. So yeah, I would say that for sure.
Deep.
What do you want to pray for us, David?
Sure, I'd love to. All right, let's do it. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this wonderful space. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Holy Spirit, for gathering us in the presence and the quality of your presence, for the conversation over complacency and contentment. Last episode, we thank you for helping us navigate and just opening the discussion to what it means, complacency, and what that looks like in our lives, and sharing stories, and just anecdotally where we're coming from. We appreciate the space that you've offered us, Lord Jesus, to just have the enablement in sharing that perspective. And we thank you, more importantly, for the audience that is able to listen and receive this message. So ultimately, we give our praise, gratitude to you, and we thank you for the space once again. And I personally am thankful for Josh and Anthony being able to share their points of view and allowing us to have this conversation just full of the Spirit. So we praise you, we honor you, and we worship you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. And that's going to be end of episode 15, kind of closing off this little mini series here of complacency and and contentment. And we thank you guys so much for taking the time to listen, as always. If you guys are listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, feel free to leave us a rating. It definitely helps us grow the channel, as well as subscribe if you're on YouTube. And it's been good. This is The Good Life, your practical guide to adulting. We'll see you guys in the next one.